Coming off the back of its big sister's critically acclaimed opening set in the early life of the GameCube, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes arrived on the scene towards the end of 2004. As the next precocious talent to emerge from the fantastic academy that is Retro Studios, it had a huge name to live up to. The Metroid series is a fabled family full of aliens, wicked power-ups, and one ass-kicking woman. And for its invaluable place in the history of video games, it's not something you want to ruin with your greasy, uncivilized, not baptized by Chozo hands. Metroid Prime had already provided us with many stunning moments for veterans of the time and newcomers alike. A change in perspective made for a fresh, savvy change at the right time. With stellar mechanics and the same Metroid formula we'd all come to know, love, and expect, it helped to continue a golden time of amazing Nintendo titles. So, with that pressure, could Retro and subsequently Echoes step up to the plate and add to the historical line of excellence that is Metroid, providing us with another memorable experience? It all comes down to what stands out as you take those weighty, you don't want to fuck with me steps on the planet. And for me, that all starts with the game's presentation and premise. Prime 2 picks up sometime after the conclusion of its older sibling, with Samus checking out a distress signal on the planet Aether. Hopefully there isn't any potential universe-ending bullshit in store for us. There's an air of familiarity to the first game, but this time around the spark doesn't arise from a band of space pirates. Instead, you stumble upon a group of Federation Marines ravaged by an unknown force. Shambling back up onto reanimated feet, the soldiers attack you under the recourse of dark entities, and it's fucking creepy. What follows are a series of cutscenes where you meet your nemesis and lose some of your items in standard Metroid fashion. Afterwards, you're left to trudge forward with the initial goal of recovering your stolen gear from the dark creatures you just encountered. The game takes on a dark tone from the start. Descending into a haze-filled dead zone full of your lost brethren is somewhat of a stark departure from the action-filled opening to Prime. Dead bodies hang from the ceiling, and the glimpse of a toxic alternate dimension early on sets the tone for the game. You're not in Kansas anymore. If, Kansas had space pirates, deathly indigenous creatures, and extreme environments. After leaving that unfortunate grave, you officially enter Aether's central hub, where the huge mass of the ancient temple rises far above the pathways and cliffs below. Entering this bastion and overcoming a quick mini-boss leads to a meeting with Umos, the last living sentinel of the Luminoth. Upon listening to his tale, you're given some background on the reason for the planet's unstable nature. A species called the Ing landed one day and corrupted the planet, splitting the world into two dimensions. Taking the light of the planet for themselves, the Ing have left Aether sitting on a perilous knife edge of non-existence. With the power to put a stop to the threat, return gear pending, Umos asks for your help with eliminating the Ing threat. For if they completely erase Aether, more planets could suffer the same fate. I love the premise of this game. It takes something familiar for those of us who have played Metroid, but adds a little more in the way of a coherent story. It's no longer about simply getting our gear back. That universe-ending bullshit? Well, it came true. Now, it's great that the game has a bit more of a story added to what we already know. That's a clear sign of progression, and it's great that Retro understood that the next game needed to evolve upon its predecessor. Despite the more apparent storyline driving you forward, the game is still incredibly immersive in that way that only a Metroid game can capture. Hints that are there to guide you along still work the same as they did in the first game, and you're given further detail on the planet and its history via scans. But this added direction formed from meeting this new character and getting insight to their race's plight is a welcome addition. However, it's not enough to merely slap on a bit more of a narrative and call it a day. That's like having a delicious, cooked to perfection rare filet mignon as the only part of your meal. Where's the delicious additions that take it from merely being a strong base and fleshing it out into a full course? There's a few factors that go towards setting the dining table, one of which is Aether's precarious split, something I'm calling dimension hopping. However, the biggest complaint I've seen lies with the game's dark dimension. People deride it for being too difficult and not providing enough direction. As much as part of me wants to be a dick and tell them all to get good, that won't solve anything. Instead, I think it's important to examine how Dark Aether ties directly into this added direction provided by a slightly deeper story, rather than just be a tool for artificial difficulty. And yes, some of its purpose is to make the game more challenging than its predecessor. I'm not even gonna lie about that. However, if that's all you're focusing on, you're kinda missing the point. For Aether to return to its normal state, it must regain control of all the light energy that was stolen by the Ing. This means we have to go to the Ink's dimension, right into their fortresses, and remove it from their annoying bug-ass limbs, crumbling their false world into a pile of spacey, non-existent dust. The sole purpose no longer revolves around reacquiring our gear. It's a logical path to take in regards to saving the planet, because, you know, you can't fix something without the proper tools. You gotta have that toolbox and a 6-pack of beer ready to go. But that's just it. The search for your stolen equipment works in tandem with the direction the game presents. It's not the driving factor. If the game were only about going to these tough areas to recover gear, that wouldn't be enough to keep us going. The fact that the narrative also plays right along with this, I think makes Echoes a more cohesive experience, and that's the main thing I want to get across here. Moving between the dimensions might be tedious at times, but it goes along with the way the game has been set up, and simply blasting this aspect for only being difficult is a bit unfair. How exactly does this dimension hopping work? Well, turns out it's pretty simple, and that's a good thing because we're going to be doing a lot of it throughout the game, but there's a tiny little detail associated with this dimension hopping that I don't think many people liked. To hop between these two dimensions, the game introduces two new beam weapons, appropriately labeled Dark and Light. Like many beams before them, they serve their purposes, not only making life easier fighting specific enemies, but also in moving your way throughout the treacherous environments you're subjected to across Aether. However, there's an interesting distinction Echoes makes with these beams in comparison to other Metroid titles: the introduction of ammo. Despite the seemingly pointless alteration to the way the additional beams work, the switch up is actually fairly manageable. The game provides a fair amount of opportunities to keep your ammo fully stocked through the continued addition of local wildlife and various boxes that are left out for you to destroy. Even the way you gather ammo is interesting. Simply destroy a pod with one beam variant and you get ammo for the other. As a result, I rarely found myself desperately low on firepower, because the game does what it can to not screw you over. If anything, I enjoy this change-up as it promotes the idea of playing carefully. Aether is full of even more danger through each door and across every room in comparison to its predecessor, and unless you want to be the next space pirate experiment, you have to remain vigilant. That being said, I understand why plenty of people would still dislike this change. Despite the new beam types and the need for ammo, you can imagine gameplay probably isn't going to change much between the first and the second games, right? I mean, sure, you can craft new environments, and that's hugely important for Metroid because we love that exploration, but what else could they change to make us step back and go, wow, oh, that's really cool, that's keeping us engrossed? Well, turns out there are a few things Retro did that are really smart. One example that immediately springs to mind is stuff like this. Wondering what that was? Easy. All that's happening here is a simple combination of two abilities that carried over from the first game, the Morph Ball Boost and the Spider Ball. But did anyone think about how cool it would be to incorporate the two items together for puzzles from the first game? I mean, look at this shit, that's fucking rad. I know I didn't make the connection when I played Prime for the first time. And the result of combining two already known abilities together for puzzle solving was an ingenious idea on the part of Retro. You save some time from not having to create a ton of new stuff, yet you can still provide many new challenges from such a simple combination. Now that deserves a gold star. I'm not even being facetious when I make that joke for the third time. That's just a smart design choice. It's not only the combinations of older items that keep things fresh. The addition of some new items along with the return of a series favorite really helped to mix up the gameplay into that delicious stew we started cooking with the first game. It's only now we've finally added in some minor ingredients to really get that shit sizzling. Man, what is it with me and food analogies? Might as well stick with it at this point. The final pinch of salt that takes Echoes to its full flavor potential comes down to how it not only utilizes these upgrades, but the environments you visit to create a fun, challenging package. And that's partly down to the puzzles the game throws at you that incorporate both the light and dark sides of each subsequent area you travel to. By smartly having you travel between the two dimensions to traverse tricky tracks and power various switches, puzzles test your wit and incorporate both worlds in a way that leaves an incredible feeling of satisfaction when you finally nab that new item. All the while, the puzzles and enemies you encounter ramp up in difficulty, continually keeping you wary of what's to come without there ever being a dramatic upturn in the challenge you face. My one gripe in terms of level design deals with some backtracking late in the game. Backtracking itself, particularly with the Metroid games, is typically done well. Even though you have to go back through some of where you've already been, it leads to an entirely new section that is fun to explore. However, the late game backtracking to find the Sky Temple keys and Echoes is a bit tedious for my liking. The act of needing keys to access the final area and having to go back to older areas to find them is sound enough in theory. But when there are so many keys and they're largely very far out of the way, it feels like something that was made just a little too long to feel rewarding. I just want to get to the end game, man! Make it so I only have one key to get for each area, that way I'm not stuck with this tiresome bullshit. While it's disappointing, the fact that this is my only real complaint tells you how well designed the rest of the game is between the backtracking and the puzzles. It's not only the design of the areas in regards to puzzles that really punctuate this game with an exclamation mark. Yet again, Retro understands how to craft beautiful environments and terrific ambience so that we are immersed in what we see and hear. The environments in Echoes are more foreboding than the areas you travel to in the first game. The overall tone is noticeably darker, with moodier levels of ambience and a more subdued color palette that really helps to drive this shift home. However, it really comes to the forefront when you enter each area's darker half. The alternate dimensions of each area do such a brilliant job of providing a discernible difference between their relatively sunny counterparts. The environments are warped, providing a greater degree of difficulty for you as you platform and fight your way through each room. You feel the oppressive weight of the darkness. You see all the purple populating the walls and floors. You hear the ominous ambience filling your ears. Shit makes me feel like I've entered the mind of Edgar Allan Poe, and I love it. I adore Metroid Prime 2. While it doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel too much, it takes everything that's fantastic about the first game, and in my opinion, it just expands it to make an even grander Metroid experience. It'll potentially leave you feeling even more helpless than the first game did, and for me, that's exactly what I want from Metroid games. So, thank you all for watching. I'm Wally the Legend, and I will see you all next time. Yeah, one thing I didn't really get into was the multiplayer, but I don't really see a point in talking about it. It was pointless, really. I mean, why? It's a Metroid game. We don't need to fight each other. It's not fucking Team Deathmatch in Call of Duty. If I want to play that, I'll play one of those games. They're good for it. But, I don't know. Fucking wanting multiplayer and shit.